I'm going to be knitting an Intarsia cardigan. Is that gonna block out? Little baby sea turtle, so cute, eyelashes. It's gonna be great. What a mic drop moment.
I'm Nora, and this is also known as Nora Knits.
Hello there, I'm Nora, and you're watching, also known as Nora Knits. Thank you so much for joining me for another podcast episode today. I've had a really creative week and dabbling in some of my crafts outside of knitting, and I'll save those till the end if you're interested to hear about them. But I've also had some interesting discoveries in knitting this week, and I'm excited to talk to you about it. I also have a little bit of a crochet project that we're getting into. So I feel like I have a lot to debrief on, and I'm glad that you're here so we could chat about it all. Before we get into things, I'd love to announce the 3 winners of our giveaway. They're going to be on the screen here. If you see your name on the screen, if you would please go ahead and just email me at akanoraknits@gmail.com. The email is down below. And make sure just to include in the subject something about the giveaway so that I know what it's about. And thank you so much to everyone who has been participating in this year-long knit along. That does, of course, mean that we're going to be going till the end of the year, and I really need to try and get some good prizes for the end of the year. So be sure to just go ahead and keep using hashtag 2025 from the vault as you knit through what you have in your stash, in your vault, and you could keep doing that all the way through the end of this year. So with that out of the way, I think we should go ahead and dive on in. You might notice that I am not wearing my darling cardigan, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. But before we do, what I am wearing is my Salty Days sweater by Veronica Lindbergh, Kutova Kika. This is knit up out of K&C Essential Cotton in the colorway Buttercup. And I will not even bury the lead for my end of year knit review video. This has been the most worn sweater this whole summer since I made it. I wear this several times a week as the weather's been cooling down a little bit here in Connecticut. It's the first thing that I reach for to throw on either as a layering piece or just on a day like today where I just want it to be a little extra cozy. I absolutely love this piece so much, and if you're interested in doing the modifications that I have done on mine, which include the little rolled hem and non-tapered sleeves and stuff, I did actually update the Ravelry page for this project. Shocker, I know, but you can go to the Ravelry page to see those modifications that I made to mine. So yeah, that's my Salty Day sweater and another Kutova Kika pattern. Let's go ahead and chat about my darling cardigan, which is the very basic drop shoulder v-neck cardigan that I've been knitting out of another K&C brand yarn, which is the K&C Cloud Paka. I think the colorway, it's either called bubblegum or cotton candy. Let's go with cotton candy. And it makes sense because the yarn is super cotton candy. So I'm going to throw her onto Helena the Hanga so we could discuss a few things about this should be finished object. So here she is. If you are in the mood to dish out a good old-fashioned "I told you so," I welcome you to pop it in the comments right here, because I should have blocked this cardigan before I went ahead and knit the double knit button band, and it's something I knew, and I was feeling lazy, and so I didn't do it. And here I am to confess to all of you that I'm not 100% happy with the finished object I have here, and I have plenty more yarn. I have no real rush to finish this. I was knitting this up to wear for my sister's baby shower, which is going to be in November. So I have plenty of time, and therefore I should just make this right, which means I'm going to be doing some frogging. So sad, but this is my reminder to all of you, to myself mostly, that those little things that seem to take so much time now are going to save you so much time in the future. It's such a hassle to stop and block and knit when you know you have the time to move to the next step, but you're like, is that gonna block out? I don't know. Go ahead and block it. It would be so much easier to have just paused on this, blocked it, and then come back and made the adjustments before knitting the button band. Whereas now I have a lot of ripping back to do, but I'm going to use this opportunity to correct a couple of things. So to begin, just so we're all clear on the vision here, I really did want this to be a quite boxy, oversized, and cropped cardigan. And I really do want it to be cropped. However, the length it's at now, I'm just feeling like it's just like an inch shorter than what I think would be the most versatile and wearable for my own personal comfort level, and especially considering the fact that it's a cardigan, it's a fall piece, it's very fuzzy. So this isn't something I could really see myself wearing if it's gonna be a very drafty number. So for those reasons, I do wish it was just about an inch longer. And the thing too is that I think the proportions here, I should have knit about another inch in the stockinette before starting the ribbing. So I am going to be ripping back to the stockinette and then adding the inch back there and then just reknitting the ribbing again. It's all good because this really is quite a quick knit. So I have no qualms about making these adjustments to make this like the best it can be. And then the other adjustment I will make in the process is I did mention in the last podcast that the buttons I was planning to use for this are just slightly wider than the button band itself. And so I had said in that video, like, oh, if I realized that before, I would have maybe added a couple stitches to the double knit button band. I'm going to do that. I am going to make my double knit button band a little bit wider so that I could use the buttons that I already have that I want to use on this cardigan. And in the end, have a piece that is as wearable and perfect as I want it to be. Other than those adjustments, though, I think that the size feels really good. The length of the sleeves are feeling really good. So that's all promising. And we'll see, maybe later on in the video, I'll even start just kind of cutting into this. I do think I'm going to make life easy for myself and just cut the bind off. Like I said, I have quite a bit of yarn left over from this one. So I'm going to make things very easy on myself and just snip off the bind off, rip out the double knit button band, snip off the root bind off on the bottom, and just work my way back to a good place that I can make these adjustments I want to make. So that's where we're at on the darling cardigan. That's why I'm not wearing it today. That's why it's not finished today. But we'll get it done as soon as possible. So I think that's all I have to say about this project. And that also means as of today, it's been on my needles for 48 days. While my darling cardigan has been hanging out, it's been totally blocked for like literally the past week. I just blocked it as soon as I finished filming the last podcast, and I literally been waiting to show you so that I could go ahead and make the changes I plan to make. So in the meantime, I have definitely been devoting most of my attention to my Miles shirt jacket by Ozetta Haley Smedley. This is my first time knitting an Ozetta pattern. It's my first time working with unspun yarn, and in this case I am using the Istex Plo2 Lopi in their red-brown colorway. I am holding this yarn double and working this project up on the 6mm recommended needles. So this has made quite a bit of progress, and I'm happy to show it to you today. Here we have it. This is where things are at. Did I rip the yarn? I did it again, you guys. As soon as you literally put any little bit of tension on this yarn, it just snaps. And that actually reminds me that I had one plate of this yarn that I was working to the end of, and the last little bit of it got just so tangled. It became a little bit of a nightmare because this yarn is very sticky to itself. So once it got sort of just to like that inner looping of the plate, it was a mess. And I wound up having to go ahead and just take the time to untangle everything. And I wound it into a very loose ball, and I actually used my yarn bowl for the first time and popped it in there. That made it very, very easy. So do with that information what you will. It's been a learning curve working with this yarn. What I have accomplished since you last saw this project is that I have indeed worked the hem on this shacket, and I've been chugging along on the sleeve. So one of my favorite things about this top-down drop shoulder pattern is the detail of the curved hem at the bottom of the sweater. I just think that when you make a really oversized kind of outerwear garment, or just anything really oversized and long, to add the detail of the curved hem where it kind of just comes up on the side around the hips, it gives the garment a little bit more shape and exposes a little bit more of a figure so that it doesn't look just so oversized and kind of clunky. I was curious to see how that was going to be worked, and it was a really fun round of German short rows, worked in a way that I hadn't worked them before, where you were kind of stacking the German short row double stitch itself, and then in your final row coming back and resolving all of those double stitches. So it was a really just interesting, fun thing to do that helps to keep a simple knit like this more engaging, and I really enjoyed the process of doing it. So you work that sort of technique on both of the front panels and then across the back as well. And once you've done that, you do work some ribbing and then do an Italian tubular sewn bind off. Now, this yarn with a lot of tension, she tends to snap, and the Italian tubular sewn bind off was a journey that we made it through, but I can't say it was the best time. Some things that I learned while I was going was it's so easy to spit splice this yarn. You're best off just working with smaller or shorter lengths at a time while you're sewing, doing your, knit off, purl on, and so on and so forth. So working with shorter lengths and then reattaching new yarn as you go, I think is the best way. And then the other thing that seems like such a silly little anecdote is that while you are actually pulling your yarn through from that knit off, purl on, off, knit on sequence, is rather than sometimes I would kind of, pull my needle through and then grab the needle and just pull all the way through until that tension, is correct at the actual bind off. Rather than just pulling that needle until your arm is fully extended, as I normally would, in this particular application, I was finding it way easier to limit the amount of distance between my hand pulling the yarn and the actual hem of this sweater and those stitches I was pulling the yarn through. So I wound up finding it was the best kind of technique to pull a few inches and then readjust my hand, go back to the base of those stitches, pull a few inches, go back. And it definitely adds a little extra time and fuss and care to doing an already fussy bind off, but really saved me because the further away your hand is, the more space there is for that tension to just grow. And in a lot of cases, it was just making that yarn weaker and weaker and weaker every time I pulled on it, and then snapping. And the worst thing that could happen would be that you pull the needle all the way out, and then you've weakened this whole length of yarn, and now you're doing the bind off, and your yarn actually snaps inside the bind off rather than on the tail. So to just take that extra time to just kind of keep all of that tension to this very limited area and pull a few inches, reset, pull a few inches, reset, I think really did make all the difference in not losing my sanity during the bind off process. I also just kept telling myself, this is going to be the worst part, is the hem, right? So the other bind offs I'll have to do are going to be the cuffs, and then of course the button band too, but even that will be a shorter distance, so not the end of the world. The hem itself is going to be the longest span of this bind off that I would have to do. So I just kind of kept reminding myself of that as I went, and really trying to make sure my tension was even and on the looser side from what I would normally do on an Italian tubular sewn bind off, because I'm kind of nervous that when I go to kind of stretch this out and block it out, I'm going to wind up snapping the yarn. So I do have a question here. If you have more experience working with the unspun yarns, once they're knitted up, how stable is this fabric? Should I be concerned about it snapping and tearing and ripping now that it's knit up? Or is it just so much more durable in this state than it is in this state? I would really love to know, just so I know kind of how to care for this garment in the future. But those are my little tips if you are working a sewn bind off on with some unspun yarn. I also would here and there, if I did see that yarn was getting weaker in that tail, I was actually just kind of mushing the two strands of yarn together so that I was kind of felting them together a little bit, and therefore adding to the strength and resilience of that tail that just gets so used and abused during any Italian sewn tubular bind off. So those are my little tips. Once the hem was complete, I came back and I picked up my stitches for the sleeve. I did wind up having to pick up at a little bit of a different rate for my sleeve, just because my row gauge is so off on this project. So I just adjusted the pickup rate, but was still able to pick up the amount of stitches listed for my size, which is the size large. And since then, I have been knitting this on the recommended needle size on my shorty needles. And I have one of my little DIY row counters here, just kind of indicating how many rows I have to knit before I do a decrease. And then my favorite little trick for working decreases a little bit more mindlessly is I will read the pattern, see how many decreases I'm supposed to work for my size, and I will grab that many stitch markers and attach them via another stitch marker to the project. In this case, I marked my first decrease with a stitch marker and then used that one to hold the rest of the decrease stitch markers, so that every time I reach the Black Pearl Magic gummy bear progress keeper on my little row counter chain I've made, I work a decrease and then I grab one of these stitch markers and mark it. So now I know, without having to tally anywhere or referring back to the pattern, that this is how many decreases I still have to work for what is listed in the pattern. And I just always bear in mind that, of course, my row gauge is off here. So I will probably start to check in with the length of this once I get close to that amount of decreases, but probably before I've just reached the end of those stitch markers. I will have tried this on and confirmed whether or not that seems accurate for me. Now, the only thing that I wish I could have done a little bit differently is I do wish, I'm working this up on my 6mm shorty needles, and I wish I had like a 6.5 or a 7mm needle shorty to work the sleeves on, because I have noticed in some of my, I think it just depends on the fiber, I do tend to get that sort of sensation where my small circumference knitting is a little bit tighter than my regular circumference knitting. And especially in this case where the body is being worked knit purl, because it's knit flat and now the sleeves are in the round, I do think that the fabric of my sleeves is just a little bit tighter than what is happening in the body of this garment. And I could tell that the fabric's just a little bit stiffer. However, this is what I had. This is the largest shorty needle I had. And I wasn't willing to sacrifice the ease of using my shorties to do magic loop or something. It wasn't worth it that much to me. But I think with this yarn being that really grabby, grippy yarn, it's that much more clear that those stitches are just a little bit tighter. But I don't think it's going to be the end of the world at the end of the day. So yeah, chugging along on the decreases on this sleeve. Of course, then I'm going to move over to the second sleeve, and then all we have left is the button band and the collar. And then I actually completely forgot that the pattern tells you to knit up your gauge swatch as one of the pockets. So I never did that. So I still have both of my pockets to knit up as well. But that seems like such an easy task at the end of all of this. I've thoroughly enjoyed knitting this so far. As of today, it's been on my needles for 21 days, and they've been 21 really wonderful days of beautiful, mindless, just fun, casual knitting. It's really been what I needed. So that's where we're at with the Miles shirt jacket. So those are the knitting project updates. Now I do also have a crochet cast on that I literally just got started on. And I also have a couple of swatches to show you that relate to my fall knitting plans. And then I have some wild acquisitions as well as a few, like I said, non-fibery. Well, I have a sewing project and a woodworking project. So again, I'll save those to the ends, but let's get into a little crochet project that I am working on. I actually completely forgot to talk about this in my fall knitting plans, but this is indeed a fall, well, it's a fall crochet plan of mine. So I had this idea that for my sister is doing a like baby sea animal nursery theme for her baby. And so I had this idea to crochet a like granny hexagon turtle. I did do like a little sketch that I could pop onto the screen here. And I just sourced the yarn and colors, although I totally forgot that I was planning to use 4 colors for the shell. And so I only got 3. So I need to go get a 4th color because I think that's the only way the math kind of works. But I just got a few little demo hexagons done last night, so I will show them to you. I have a mess of yarn that I'm using. This is something that drives me so crazy about these kinds of yarns, and I need to just take the time to cake them up. So these are the yarns that I'm using. It's literally so tangled. What a fun experience this is, huh? These are all loops and threads yarns, and I did go based off of color more than anything. So I do have 2 different yarns here that are very similar, but they're a little bit different. So one is the Petite Pearl. It's a polyester. They're all like that fuzzy, just blanky yarn. So one is the Petite Pearl, and then the other one is it called like the Skinny Chenille? Skinny Chenille. And I'm going to be using 4 different colors for the main colors of the shell. And then they're all going to be bordered in the white. And then the rest of the turtle is going to be the sage green that you see on my shoulder here. So I do just need to get 1 more color for this shell, but that's the 3 colors that I have right now are this really pretty like periwinkly blue. I have the really lovely lavender, and then the rosy pink color. It's a very dusty pink. It's not too bright. So I'm going to have to take some time to just cake these things up because they always become a mess with that yarn vomit situation. And I even have my crochet hook just sticking out of the the end of one of those balls. So what I have right now are 3 of the main color hexagons. I have not woven in an end. I haven't done anything like that. But these are going to be 3 of the main colors of the shell. And then this is going to be the body of the turtle. And the goal is for this to sort of act as like a play mat, a very low kind of cushion so that my sister can, you know, maybe roll it up and take it on the go with her, or just to have in the baby's room or to move it around the house. So the goal is like baby play mat, even maybe like milestone picture backdrop. And the more exciting part about this is that this is going to be a collaborative effort amongst my family. So I'm going to be crocheting this turtle alongside outside, my aunts and my cousins, and I'm so excited that they were all on board to do this with me. And so these are basically just the samples, so I could figure out the amount of hexagons we're going to need and how big I want this whole turtle to be. And then they're all going to be helping me make these hexagons, so I don't have to make them all myself. And then I'll be going through and assembling everything and adding the fins and the head and the little details and all of that. So the idea is that the fun colors will make up the shell on the back of the turtle, and they're all going to be bordered in the white so that I can easily go ahead and join all of those hexagons with the white yarn, and you won't see like the line of demarcation. And then that's going to make up that kind of round shape of the shell. It's going to be made up of the granny hexagons as well as half hexagons. I will include a link in the description of the tutorial that I followed to make these hexagons. And I am using my favorite 5mm crochet hook. This one is just like, if I could crochet with this hook always, I would. So that's going to make up the back of the shell. And then the bottom of the shell is just going to be like the mirror image of that, but just done in the sage green so that they're the same size. I'm going to, from there, attach the back of the shell and the bottom of the shell. And I'm going to finish off the sort of edge of the shell with either a ruffle detail or shell stitches, crochet shell stitches. I kind of am going to have to experiment to see which one I like better. And then I'll go in and add the head and the fins and all of that. And I'm also going to make this so that my sister can actually kind of take the actual crocheted part off of another cushion so that she could throw it in the wash if she has to. So that's kind of just what I've been dabbling in, and it was fun to finally sit down and do this. It was actually a really lovely little mindless project last night, and I'm really excited to have my family help me make this. I hope you guys are excited. I'll be sending you guys the details of what to expect once I finish doing my math. So that is what I'm planning. If you are interested, I guess I wouldn't like sell this as a pattern or something, but I would be happy to just make the notes if anyone else wanted to make a fun little turtle mat for a little one in their life as well. So that is my other kind of top of mind whip that we're hoping to get done before November. I don't have a name for it. If you have a name for it, let me know. Little baby sea turtle, so cute, eyelashes. It's gonna be great. Okay, now let's talk about some swatches, acquisitions, and this is particularly relevant if you did see the fall knitting plans video. I swatched for 2 of the sweaters in that video, and I tried to swatch for a third. But let's start first with just, this is the swatch I've made for the Zero sweater by Morika Knit using the orange Ella Rae classic wool and the Rowan Kid Silk mohair, which I did acquire 2 additional balls from Ravelry stash. I purchased them from another Ravelry user who had them in stash so that I could fill out the mohair quantity I would need for my size in this sweater. And I wanted to get ahead of the game so that I could work those in to the sweater in helical knitting before it became an issue of I've run out of mohair. So I've gone ahead and knit the swatch. I've received the yarn. It is a little bit different. I knew it was not the same dye lot, but I got a really good deal for the yarn. And so that's why I wanted to get ahead of it and be able to just work those in a little bit more seamlessly, I hope. And I'm just so, so excited to knit this sweater. This color is like everything to me right now. And then the other swatch I did is for the Rosie sweater by Lanit. And here's your last chance to guess which color scheme I swatched for. These were the 4 that I was considering. So last second guesses. Okay, here we have my swatch. These are both blocked, by the way. So I wound up being most eager to try the version of the rosy where I was using the rose color as my background and then the pearl color in the roses themselves, and then using the capers colorway with my Sandusgarn tin silk mohair for the vines and the leaves. I saw a comment telling me that what I've now experienced was going to happen. And I was like, yeah, but let me see it. So that was why I swatched this one first, because I really liked the idea of this rose color being the main background. But I've noticed a couple things. A, the pearl color up against the rose, I think reads incredibly gray. It is a white and gray blended color. It's a really beautiful color that I'm like dying to use, and it hasn't worked in any project I've tried to make it work in. And I think that this is another example of that, at least in this iteration. I just think that the color looks a little murky and a little dusty on that rose background, and I therefore don't think it reads as beautiful white roses. So not loving that. The second thing that I think is probably more obvious, especially from here, is that the rose and the green are really, really similar in color saturation. And to give you a little sneak peek inside of my hairstylist brain, when we talk about hair color, you're usually referencing two different numbers and aspects of hair color. The first one being level, and that's going to be your black colorway being a level 1, so the absolute darkest you could get. And then your white blonde colorway, you go up to like a level 12, but it's usually referenced to cap out at 10. But let's just say 10 is the highest, being white blonde, and then 1 is the lowest, being that dark black. The second number and contribution to that hair color is going to be tone. So you're going to have undertones like blue or yellow or orange, red, green. So there's that aspect to it as well. When we're talking about contrast in a colorwork knit, and this is actually going to come up again in a little bit, but I tend to see it that way. So in my eyes, the white that I've used on the roses here, it's about that level 10. And the tone, the underlying tone is leaning very cool, very gray. Which pops really nicely off of the other colors I've used, which I would categorize this rose color as somewhere at around, I don't know, level 6 or so. And then the green is also living around a level 6. Therefore, the rose and the green really don't do well up against each other. There's simply not enough contrast. And so I think that the best bet I have if I want to use these 3 colors is going to be to try and swatch again with the pearl as the background, and then the rose as the rose flowers, and then the green as the stems, the vines, the leaves, so that the main feature would be really complementary in both living in that level 6 territory, but they pop so nicely off of that level 10 background. Not to get too technical, but that is kind of how I think of these things with color. This also probably comes back to the idea that if you took a photo of this in black and white, the contrast of the leaves and the rose background would be non-existent, basically, because they're living on about that same level. If I really felt committed to having the rose as the background, I think I'd have to just do the flowers and vines in one color as the pattern is written, or I would have to change the green for something that's less saturated, maybe a little bit lighter in color, so that it was living maybe at a level 8, and therefore there'd be a little bit more pop. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be casting this on in the immediate future because of some other projects I have, but this was a fun swatch to make, and I'm interested to try another swatch, to try one of those other variations. So those are my fall knitting plans swatching updates if you were curious. And then let's chat now about the other acquisition I have, where I would like to discuss some intarsia knitting with you. So in the fall knitting plans video, I also discussed my Christmas project this year that I'm very excited about. And I talked about purchasing some yarns to support that project. And that was actually this almond wool of the Andes from Knit Picks, which is supposed to be the background color of my colorwork sweater. I'm going to throw the image up here. That's probably the closest reference to what I am going to be making, and serves as the inspiration for the style of this garment. So this I thought would be a good background color online. However, as I literally opened the package, I thought, that's too dark. This goes back to that idea of level. A lot of the colors I'm going to be putting onto this colorwork Christmas sweater are probably living around a level 6 colorway, if we're using that terminology again. And I would definitely say that this is something more like a level 7 or 8. And so it really made the whole sweater color scheme look very muddy. Therefore, I bit the bullet and purchased a backup option, which is the Oyster Heather colorway. And these two look very similar online, or at least they did when I was purchasing the almond one. And now that I have them both in person, it is very obvious to me that the Oyster Heather is pretty significantly lighter, definitely coming in around a level 9. So this is going to be the background of my Christmas sweater, and I will find another use for this color. I actually saw the Petite Knit Dagmar zipper sweater, and it's in her samples in a very similar colorway, and I thought, oh, that could be kind of nice. So maybe that would be my first petite knit. I don't know. But in the meantime, this is going to be the background colorway for my Christmas sweater project. Now, I was so excited to knit up my swatch. And I busted out the chart that I had made, which I'm still waiting to finish the swatch to make sure that I have the gauge of the chart all accurate. And as you could tell by the inspiration photo, the sweater includes the background color and then these kind of just large blocky chunks of different motifs. And as someone who has little to no experience with color work, I was shocked after knitting several rows of my swatch with this as the background and one block motif in the middle. All of a sudden I noticed, I don't know why it took me like the entire swatch to see that the motif in between the two edges of this background color was completely independent of just two strips of this Oyster Heather colorway. And I was knitting a stranded color work swatch. So I'm looking at this. It was a mess, first of all. I was like tangled up in it. Oh my gosh, it was crazy. And I realized, I'm like, well, yeah, at no point does this block motif ever integrate itself with the surrounding background color. Therefore, I was just knitting a strip of the background, the strip of the motif, and then a strip of the background again. And literally there was nothing connecting those three sections. So, that was enlightening. And I was laughing. I was like, this is where my just sort of bold ignorance shows up. And I think it's hysterical. Like, I just thought I could casually knit this insane colorwork sweater with zero experience, like doing it myself. I think it's so funny that this is how my brain works. But I'm someone who learns by doing, by making mistakes. And here it was. It was in that moment that I did a little research and discovered that stranded color work is not going to work for this style of sweater. And instead, I'm going to have to do for the first time intarsia knitting, which I've now been watching multiple videos about and I'm fascinated by. As we speak, I have some little bobbins in the mail that I just think I'm like, let me just get organized. And I think the more organized I could be about this, the more success I'm going to have. So I'm going to be knitting an Intarsia cardigan, which is good because it actually solves another issue that I had, which was since knitting this swatch, I discovered that I am not a fan of doing color work flat. And so I was thinking about knitting my cardigan in the round and then steeking it, which was already causing quite a bit of just mental gymnastics because it's going to be a V-neck cardigan. So I was like, how do I do? I've never steeked something. Now I'm doing this whole endeavor. I also was considering like having a saddle shoulder detail. So then how do I do that? And basically what I've discovered, I think, is that with Intarsia, it's significantly easier, I think, to work flat. Therefore, I no longer need to figure out how to steek a V-neck stranded color work cardigan. And instead, I will be able to knit the cardigan in the way that's comfortable for me and that I'm used to, knitting it flat. And the only different thing here is going to be the Intarsia knitting. So if you have tips, tricks, references, any advice for Intarsia knitting, I would love to hear it. And hopefully I will have at least a swatch in the next podcast. And maybe then I can go ahead and get started on this project because it's going to be a big one. So please let me know your experience with Intarsia. If you have any recommendations for like a very beginner Intarsia colorwork project, that's something small like an accessory, a shawl or something, like a little neck scarf or something that I could use to just kind of get my feet wet with the technique before I jump into this whole cardigan project. Also, I'd love to hear about that. So that's kind of where we're at with all those fall knitting plans, and most especially my Christmas cardigan. That is all of the knitting, the crocheting, and now moving into some non-knitting crocheting projects. I thought I would share, first of all, a little sewing project that I've been working on for the past week. And I just am excited to share it with you, mostly because it's been taking up a lot of my time. So last year, I think it was just last year, right? We went to an Argentina soccer game and I made my crochet messy dressy for that. And now we're going to be going to an Inter Miami soccer game. And I decided that I have to make my outfit for this occasion as well. It's just kind of who I am. So Lionel Messi is like the star player of the world and therefore the Inter Miami team. And so he plays for his national team and his club team. The national team is Argentina. The club team is Inter Miami. And I thought it would be really fun to have a Messi jersey that is half Argentina and half Inter Miami. So I purchased 2 jerseys, one being Inter Miami, one being Argentina. And as you might be able to tell from here, I cut them in half. I split them up the middle and I have been combining them into one really fun kind of girly dress jersey. Actually, I could just throw this onto the hanger so you can see what I've done. Here it is. Admittedly, it's looking a little bit more Harley Quinn Halloween costume than I would have liked for it to have looked. But still, I do think it's kind of fun and just, I don't know, it's just who I am in my nature. So I cut the 2 jerseys up the middle and then I got this grommet tape it's on a cotton twill, and I serged the edge of that center cut that I had made, and then I top stitched the grommet tape on top of that edge on both sides of the jerseys. I also purchased them both in a 3XL so that it would be kind of oversized and I would have a little bit more play with it. But I did that all the way down, and then using some actual cotton twill tape, I laced up the front so that it has a little more, fun vibe to it. From there, I actually took in the sleeves a little bit because they were looking just a little too big for me. And then I did a little box pleat underneath that I'm still going to add the grommet tape to either side of, so that when I'm wearing this, the jersey is kind of cinched on the sides, and then there's like the extra fabric providing like a flirty little pleat from underneath, so that this kind of has more of a dress vibe. Honestly, I'm most proud of the back of this, where I attached the two halves by, again, cutting them up the middle. I serged the edge and then sewed them together, and then ironed out that seam allowance so that it's split evenly across the two sides. And I top stitched that down so that there's the top stitch running on either side of the center seam. And I just think it came out so clean and neat and tidy. And so all I have left to do is add the little grommets on the side, lace those up, and then I'm going to be using my Cricut machine to cut out a messy 10 to put on the back of this to make it look like it was always one jersey. So this is such a silly little project, but it is where a lot of my time has gone over the past week, and I'm pretty proud of how it's coming out. So I'll definitely be sure to post some photos and share that with you once it's done and I've worn it to the game. Then the final project I wanted to share with you, I will tell you about while I make the bold choice to cut my darling cardigan. If I don't do this right here and right now, it's going to sit for a while. So let's just go ahead and do this while I tell you about the other project I worked on since we spoke last. You might be familiar with another knitting podcaster who is by True Lane. Her name is Chelsea. And since moving to Connecticut, she and I have befriended each other. So I was really excited to join her for her birthday, little birthday girls' night dinner. And honestly, anyone who's been here for any length of time at this point probably knows that like gifting is my love language. I love to give gifts. It's my favorite thing. So even though she said no gifts, I told her I'm so sorry I could not respect that because I had already started a little project for her. She moved from Seattle, and tulips are a significant flower in Seattle. And since she's been living here, I thought it would be fun to give her a little piece of home to decorate her Connecticut home with. And I hadn't been in my woodworking shop in a little bit, so I figured I would take the opportunity when inspiration struck to get in there and make a little something for Chelsea. So I took some photos of it when I was done. I was really, really proud of this little project that just got me back in the shop. So I utilized a few different kind of scraps I had kicking around. And one was the base of the tulip, which was actually this cherry that I have a few slabs of that my uncle gave me. And one I actually had cut and started another project in that just never came to fruition. So it was already kind of in this little tiny piece. And I figured, oh my gosh, that would make the perfect size for a tulip stem. And then I had these other pieces of maple that were actually cut for the same project that never came to fruition. And I was like, they would make the perfect tulip petals. So with all things I had laying around, I made her this sweet little tulip. And if you're curious about the woodworking of it, I used a multitude of different tools to get this done. I tried to keep it really simple, and so I used my jigsaw to cut out the majority of the tulip shapes. I used my drill press to help cut out the kind of center of that little stem on the cherry, so that would make the jigsawing of that slender portion a little bit easier. I did a little bit of hand sawing to get the rest of those little intricate cuts on the tulip and things. And then I also, I used a belt sander that I got kind of crafty, and I just clamped it to my workbench so that I could use it as more of like a stationary sander while I held the pieces to it and sanded them that way. I finished with an absolute ton of hand sanding, and then everything was polished off with a little Danish oil, and I utilized dowels to make this stem. So I drilled a hole through the bottom of the leaves, and I glued the dowel in there to make the stem of the tulip, which was then glued into the main kind of portion of the tulip itself. And then there was another dowel that was inserted kind of from the front to the back of the tulip, where I had those other little petals that were secured on there with that dowel and a little bit more glue. And I just like genuinely love so much seeing people open a gift. And I told her, I was like, I'm so sorry, I cannot respect your rule of no gifts. However, I do have my own rule, which is no gifting unless it's handmade. And so I followed that. So it's not like I just showed up with like a gift card to TJ Maxx or something, you know? It was something I really thought she would like, and she did. And her family loved it too. She sent me their reactions to it. So I love that. And honestly, I just thought it came out, it was so pretty. And I kind of want to make another one for myself because it was fun. It was a fun little project. And funny enough, while I was doing it, I was getting a little hung up on the details, as we do as makers. And Mr. Knits was listening to me gripe about how all these little flaws were popping up and I wasn't happy with it. And he said, "Excuse me." Said, "Aren't you the one who says the imperfections are what make something so perfectly handmade?" I was like, oh, what a mic drop moment. He got me with my own line. But then he said, he's like, "Why does that apply to knitting, but you can't apply that to anywhere else when you're making something by hand?" And I was like, whoa, you're right. Why not? I don't know why. I did kind of struggle to transfer that belief when it comes to knitting. The little, missed stitches here and forgotten decreases there and funny little bubbly hems. It's like, whatever, it's fine. But in woodworking, I expected myself to have this perfect, polished outcome. And it's okay. It's so okay that that was not the case. And I quite literally had to put down the tools and take a step back and say, it does not need to be perfect. First of all, you're gifting this to someone who has an appreciation for handmade goods. So already that like extra level of stress it doesn't have to be there. And then, yeah, it's true. All those little quirky bits where the pencil marks wouldn't sand off for some reason, and the little glue drips that I simply couldn't clean up, and the funny edges that maybe didn't meet the surface so perfectly, and the little bit of the weeble wobble in the base of it. They really are little signatures that I made it myself, and I needed to be reminded of that in that moment, and that was it was a very interesting moment for me. It was like a mic drop. I was speechless. What a shocker. But it was a very fun project that I got to work on, especially because the weather was so gorgeous. It was fun to sit outside and hand sand and pull out all the tools that I hadn't used in a little while, and all for someone that really does appreciate something handmade, and that I wanted to show how much I appreciate having her in my life. So Chelsea, thanks for having me as your friend. And I'm so glad that you like your tulip. I had a lot of fun making it. And yeah, that was the last thing that I made this week. It's been a productive one. And all at the same time very unproductive because because I tried to jump the gun. So I don't know who needs to hear it. Block your project in the middle of it. Stop worrying about things not being perfect. But I also, to make another hairstylist reference, I went to a Paul Mitchell school where they had this saying of do it right, do it once. And sometimes that's the right way to go to. Do the mid-project block, pause and reevaluate if you need to, or else you're going to be like me sitting here ripping out your double knit button band. Then I'm shocked. Why is this coming out that it's like the double knit button band is just coming off on its own? I don't know. But I guess I'll be sitting here doing this for a little bit longer, so I won't make you watch that. That's everything I've been working on. Please, if you are one of our giveaway winners, make sure that you email me. I will get to your emails in the middle of next week, as I'll be away this weekend. So please bear with me as I will probably wait until I'm back home to answer your email. And with all of that, if you enjoyed this video, it would mean so much to me if you would go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you subscribe and you ring the bell, then you're going to be notified anytime I post a new video. However, you can usually expect a Saturday morning upload at 9:30 a.m. Eastern time. And with that, a big old thanks for watching, and I will catch you on the next one. All right, you guys. Bye.